I'm Will Holloway. This is my farm. It's Blue Lake Farms here in southwest Santa Rosa. Today we're going to be talking tools, talking shop, and what it takes to make a small farm work. This is a 10-acre farm, leased property and owned infrastructure. I started initially farming 7 years back, about a mile down the road on Ludwig Avenue, farming around an acre. All handwork, pretty much no tillage, kind of doing the market garden thing for a while. Purchased this business in 2017, so we just finished up our 4th season here. The farm has always been organic practices, and when I purchased Ketzel Farm, the organic certification had been rescinded because those guys were just thinking about closing the farm down, and so we got that up and running, and so we've been certified organic since July of 2017. We farm roughly 6.5 acres here, predominantly sell in the past to wholesale. We've done more direct this year at farmers markets, and we specialize in growing stuff for grocery stores for the most part. Like many farmers starting out, I kind of had no idea what I was doing. I didn't come from an agricultural background. I was actually doing vineyard and winery work before that. So I was starting with basically just a hoe and a shovel, pitchfork and a wheelbarrow kind of a situation. Maybe after a year or so of just working with nothing but kind of brute force, I bought a wheel hoe, which started me down a path of starting to think in straight lines and efficiency and just being able to push a wheel hoe over a crop and weed it as opposed to scuffling around with a hoe. Kind of a no-brainer, but also a bit of a revelation when I came to that point. At the time, getting a wheel hoe and a push seeder and maybe a nice scuffle hoe, those were some of the first tools that I think I bought, other than like a refrigerator and a truck. After the wheel hoe, maybe a little bit nicer hand tools. At that point, I had an old Troy-built rototiller with like a water bottle for a gas tank that was strapped to the side, and I'd gotten it for free, and mostly sheet mulching, and that was on the old site. And when I moved to the new site, I was lucky enough to get a tractor lended to me by a neighbor, and they lent me a disc, chisel plow, and a mower, and I was able to make it work with the first season, more or less with just that. I bought a plastic mulch layer / bed shaper that same fall, and we used that to make beds. Oh, and I had a borrowed rototiller for the tractor as well from someone else. So I kind of patchworked it together for a full season. That first season I was farming 2.5 or 3 acres by myself, and it was pretty miserable. It wasn't a good year. I had some health stuff going on, and I had a bit of like a awakening that I had a cancer scare, and it kind of made me reconsider the way I was spending time on the farm. I was working 7 days a week. I was working sun up to sundown. I would only see my partner when it was dark, and for like the 2 hours that I was maybe conscious. And I was 26 or 27 and thought I was invincible, and came to the realization that in fact I'm not, and it's pretty important how we spend our time in life, and I wanted to be able to have a little bit more balance in life. And that's when I made a deliberate decision with the farm that I would do whatever I could to borrow the money I needed to operate efficiently in a way that would give me some work-life balance. And that was a scary point, and it was a point where I all of a sudden got serious instead of just kind of ad hocing through a seed catalog and doing farmers markets, that I made a deliberate business plan, tried to set a budget as best I could, estimate all the costs, figure out how much money I needed to operate, and what kind of equipment I would need to function efficiently and in an economic way that would ultimately lead to me being able to have a little bit more of a work-life balance, and that I could afford to have more employees and have an income that would allow me to go on vacation maybe once a year. When I finally made that choice, what I ended up doing was buying a new tractor from Kubota, because I could not afford a used tractor, because I could get financing, but I didn't have $10,000 or $20,000 sitting around in cash to be able to buy a used tractor. And so I was able to convince Kubota through a little bit of financial, making things look better than they really were, to lend me the money to buy a new tractor. And that has been something that I have not regretted a single time. It's a large investment. It was like in the $60,000 range. And from there, I've bought both new and used implements used mower and a used disc and things like that we were able to piece together. Once I got the new tractor, one of the first things I got was a transplanter and then a cultivating tractor after that. The combination of those two was, I would say, kind of a milestone for the farm. That season went well. I think we double or tripled our gross sales that year, and just by being a bit more efficient. And that year I had a staff of 3 full-time workers. Following that year, that kind of gave me the courage to borrow a little bit more and purchase kind of the next round of equipment. And that's when we got a Lesh bed shaper, and we started to remove the rototiller from our system because it was really abusing our soils, and we were able to purchase the spader. And we also got a Colt Cress Argus finger weeder setup that cultivates 3 lines at a time. That goes on the back of the tractor, and it kind of made our cultivating tractor obsolete for weeding. The finger weeder system is, as long as your transplanting is good and your bed prep is good, it is pretty revolutionary for us. We now do almost no hoeing. We plant a couple thousand feet of bed, or 1,000 bed feet of lettuce every week, and I think we maybe hoed lettuce 3 times this year. And that's not because we were okay with having a weedy crop. That's because we were getting our cultivation down. And that means that harvest is faster because you have a cleaner prep system, and it just kind of makes everything more efficient from there on. I would say a very essential piece of equipment for us that's kind of a small dollar one is a vacuum plate seeder. So that allows us, it's just a vacuum hooks up to a plate, sucks one seed onto each hole, you turn the vacuum off, the seeds drop into the tray. That allows us to do our successions of lettuce every week in maybe 2 hours to do about 100 flats with 2 people, start to finish. And without that, if you're hand seeding, it would take probably an 8-hour day for 2 people. We also have a germination chamber that we built on farm, and essentially it's got a hot water bath on the bottom, it's on a thermostat, and a bunch of racks inside, and that's pretty essential for the amount of peppers that we do. Peppers can be a little finicky on germination, and that allows us to put about 100 trays at a time into the germination chamber. It holds really perfectly steady at 80 degrees, and it allows us to get about 100% germination. So we now seed our peppers straight into celled flats where they'll live until we transplant, as opposed to seeding them into open trays to get the best germination we can and then pricking them out. So that again was that saved maybe 2 weeks worth of labor in the spring by making that switch, which is 2 weeks for 2 people. So what is that? $2,000, $3,000 just by making that germination chamber with some old cooler panels. A lot of people, when you're just getting going, you don't have the experience to give you the confidence to finance equipment or go into debt to farm. And there's definitely a stigma about it in the community as well. And I think that it's something that I kind of looked at head on at about year 4, I would say, of farming, or year 5, whereas if I want to make this a career, I need to make it long-term viable. And one of the ways I make it long-term viable is to have the tools I need. And I can either do this incorrectly with improper tools and work way too hard and way too long and not get stuff done as well, or I can make the decision to make calculated risk essentially and buy equipment and finance it with debt. Farmers have a lot of advantages in that there is, compared to most businesses, extremely affordable financing for equipment or property or pack shed improvements or any of those things, using FSA or FarmLink or American Ag Credit or whoever, even just local lenders or slow money or any of those options. We, as a farm, have borrowed many times, and I will say responsibly and successfully to this point and within our means, but it's a hard calculation to make. And any piece of equipment that we're buying that's, I don't know, over $1,000, we'll sit down and look at its potential to save time, physical exhaustion, or improve quality of product. And one of those 3 things, or all of those 3 things, should pay for the piece of equipment. And I think larger purchases that could be a 5-year decision. So you're looking like, will this pay for itself within 5 years? And I think that's a reasonable and responsible amount to spend. And then what I've found, honestly, even with pieces of equipment that are $10,000 to $40,000, a lot of them will pay for themselves in one season if you use them correctly. And that's at our scale, which is not huge. That's at 6.5, 7 acres of intensively farmed vegetables. And it's a hard decision to make, and it feels really scary, especially the first couple times, to borrow a good amount of money and buy something when you're like, you have a well thought out system that has never been practiced because you don't have the tools to implement that practice. And so it's scary to buy those tools to implement that practice without anything other than like calculations on paper and like your own gut feeling of your ability to do it. I will say after 4-5 years of like buying expensive things to farm, it has not only been like economically very viable, and it gets less scary and makes you less queasy when you do it. It's now more of just like a hardline decision. We'll sit down and make a spreadsheet or whatever it needs to be to, if we're switching to a 4-line lettuce system and that's going to cost us $40,000 worth of equipment, is it worth it? And we can sit down and be like, in 1 year it's break even, and then it's like we're literally making a bad decision if we don't do that, even if that decision feels scary and it's $40,000 worth of stuff. And how often does a farmer actually take home $40,000? Well, I don't know, hopefully more often now. And that's kind of the calculus behind it. And we just look at it very objectively. Every business borrows money to start for the most part, unless they have a large nest egg. And I think even if you have a large nest egg, borrowing money, if you go belly up and you're borrowing from a bank, at least it's a bank's money and it's not yours. You don't want to be speculating on your parents' retirement or on your friend's bonus check or whatever it is. Banks lend money and charge interest based on risk, and that is their business model. And so like let them have that business model and use it. Like every year we're taking an operating loan. It's cheaper to borrow money than it is to pay the taxes on carryover for a season. So it just makes financial sense. And the more that you use credit, the more you'll have available to you and the quicker it is. And now we're at the point where we have like a revolving line of credit. We no longer use an operating loan, and that means that we only are paying for what we're using. It gives us a whole bunch of freedom that if we find a piece of equipment or something we need and we find a good deal on it, the money's just sitting there. And that is a luxury that has taken like 5 years of diligent borrowing, repaying, getting a good rapport on that, keeping clean books too, which is like another not exciting answer for most people, but like hire a bookkeeper. It's something that I did the first year I started to expand onto this property, and it's an expense, but it is a worthwhile one. Everything is done correctly, and so when you go to a bank, like based on reality and current financials, whether or not you can afford something, and the bank can also look at those and know whether or not you can afford something. Yeah, like that's an essential part, I think. And so if you aren't into keeping your own books, and most farmers hate paperwork, I think like hiring a bookkeeper might be step one to getting financing to be able to get the tools you need. Yeah, it's kind of a weird way of going about like, do you want to buy tools? But like, it's kind of a necessary and practical way. One of the things that's like a not super exciting or sexy thing that is like just coming down the pipe is like the stricter food safety regulations. As we grow in sales, we have to consider more and more of that. And so looking at washing equipment, things like chemical injectors and like rinse conveyors, that's one of the things we're looking at getting. So we'll be able to hydro-cool and wash and sanitize with that. Other trends than that, like finger weeders are trendy, and I will tell you from my personal perspective, they are rightfully trendy. It's a very, very easy to use piece of equipment. There's some stuff that I'm more wary of. There's the paper pot transplanters and paper chain transplanters that are tractor mounted that you're seeing like really large production systems in Salinas, and they are extraordinarily fast compared to any other transplanting by hand or using a water wheel or a mechanical transplanter. The bigger systems down in the valley, they can plant 4 rows at 6 miles an hour. I mean, it's insane. I'm kind of wary of those systems. There's been a lot of issues around the National Organic Program approval on the papers and binders they're using in those. That's like a not super fun way to look at equipment, but a very valid way if you're an organic farmer is seeing what things are like they're wish-washy on, and be wary of that. Like, the last thing you want to do is buy an expensive piece of equipment and learn that you can't use it in 6 months. And when you can't use it, neither can everyone else that has one, and so good luck selling it. One of the things I'm seeing more of small farms getting is no-till but tractor scale equipment, and I think that's really exciting. That's super fun. We purchased maybe 2 years ago a no-till drill for seeding cover crops, and you can also seed grains and things with that. And it has allowed us to cover crop more efficiently. It's the width of one of our beds, outside edge to outside edge, and so we can run it. If we have a spare bed that we just cleaned a crop out of, we can plant a summer cover crop in there in 15 minutes. We just leave it full of our summer cover crop mix and just throw it on the tractor and drive that bed out. And we basically had no bare ground for any more than like 30 days. This year, if it was going to be bare for like 35 days, it got a cover crop. It's making improvements on our soil, and it's making it so if we don't need ground in the spring, we can mow it off and direct seed a summer cover crop straight into it without any tillage. Like, tillage is destructive. Like, there's no two ways around it, and at this point, it's been necessary for us to be both physically, like personally physically sustainable and financially sustainable. Something that we consider on the farm is like kind of essentially 3 pillars of financial sustainability, personal sustainability, and then environmental sustainability. And in my mind, if we are not financially sustainable, we won't have the capital to do it next year. And if we're not personally sustainable, we won't have the interest in doing it the following year. And so by focusing on finances first, I worked too much and really hard for a few years, but was able to get to a point where we could start to worry about our own personal sustainability and start to we could afford the equipment that would allow that. And now we're getting to the point where we can afford the equipment that's pushing us into the next level of environmental sustainability. And so that's what the spader is. It's still tillage, but it's much, much better for the soil. That's what the no-till drill is. That's, all of those things are heading in a direction of reducing our tillage and soil disturbance. Something that we are hacking together this year, hopefully finish it for this coming season, is a no-till transplanter, which is not only environmentally better, it's less passes with the tractor, it's less weeding and stuff if you manage it correctly. It's a little bit of untested ground in California in some ways, and I know there's people that have tried it unsuccessfully, and I know there's some people that have done it successfully, but everybody's pretty much experimenting, and so we'll see. But that is one thing that I'm pretty legitimately excited about and interested in, is figuring out ways that we can at least remove tillage from our system for, say, 18 months at a time. I will say that Instagram is a resource to find farmers that have other pieces of equipment, and around here there's not that many farms, especially mechanized farms. They're either way larger, like down in Salinas, or they're kind of backyard CSA market farm, hobby size farms. So Instagram has been I don't really want to promote them, but they're also a way that I'm able to see who has what tools, and I'm always hounding over who has what, because people are happy to talk about it. And so when you see somebody in Vermont that has the transplanter you're thinking about, you can shoot them a message, and odds are they'll call you 10 minutes later and you'll spend 2 hours on the phone talking about tools. And if another local farmer has it, ask them their honest opinion, maybe see it in use. Do your research and don't just listen to the salesman. And sometimes do listen to them, because I've had them talk me out of plenty of things that I'm grateful for. Certain salesmen will sell you something because they want to sell you something once, and certain salesmen will give you good advice because they want a lifelong customer. The folks at Colt or Ultra USA or about the spader, those guys will set you up super well. They want to see you succeed, and they want to sell you the tools you need, not stuff you don't. There's a lot of books on equipment. Look at what they're doing in the Netherlands. They're the most productive by square foot farmers in the world. They have awesome tools. Trade shows and stuff can be cool, but everything's shiny and exciting, and it's a little bit misleading. See it, go to somewhere where you can see it in the field days. I know they do cultivation field days here. They do them in all sorts of states, and that's a good way to go too. Technology and gadgets are they're always tempting, and I think it's important when you're looking at a piece of equipment, you need to look at your whether you have a mission statement or pillars that you run your business on, or whatever the way you want to look at it, but does it help you get to that goal? From a holistic standpoint. And I think that's a pretty valuable and important way to look at new technology is, can you will you feel good about it if you look at your goal and then look at that piece of equipment? So if you want that new rototiller because it's easier to do this job, but you ultimately want to stop rototilling, don't buy a rototiller. We have a plastic mulch layer that I absolutely hate that piece of equipment. It binds up and the mulch blows off in the wind, and it's just I hate using it. And because I hate using it, we also lay less plastic, and that's I don't want to be using plastic on the farm. And if I bought a new $4,000 plastic mulch layer, we're gonna put down a lot of plastic. Same with a plastic lifter. I didn't get one of those because it would be easier to get the plastic out of the field. And I want my last memory of farming with plastic from this year to be how much it sucked pulling that plastic out by hand. Because I'm gonna use less of it. And so I think with any technology, looking at it and saying, does this help us towards our sustainability goals or our personal sustainability or our financial goals? All those factors have to be looked at. And you can definitely steer yourself away from a tempting piece of equipment that really doesn't push you in the right direction.